When it comes to the Nintendo Entertainment System, originally released in 1985 here in the US, there was no shortage of amazing games. There was also no shortage of really bad games either, but such is always the case when a console reaches the pinnacle of success like the NES did. So, when Nintendo launched its online service for the Nintendo Switch, which included 20 classic NES titles, you'd better believe it caught the eyes of older gamers like myself. And as of the recording of this video, there are now over 80 classic NES games in the Switch Online library. Hey there, and welcome to the Generation S YouTube channel. My name is Dan Kemp, and today, as you may have noticed from the title of the video, we're going to be talking about my top 10 NES games available in the Switch Online library. And before you say anything, yes, I am fully aware that the entire pantheon of NES games has been available digitally in some form or another for over 20 years. But that's not the point of this video. The challenge here is to look at what's currently available in the Switch Online library, and then look at the top 10 games from my childhood that I played in the late 90s and early 2000s. At this point, a lot of the classic NES games are actually being released as standalone titles or as part of some kind of a collection, so they're not available in the Switch Online library and won't be on this list. And also keep in mind, I actually didn't own some of the more popular NES games that are available in the library, so once again, they're not going to be on the list. For example, I didn't own The Legend of Zelda or play it as a kid, so it did not make the cut. I also want to take this time to remind you to check out the official Generation S podcast. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, or even easier, click on the link in the description. We cover what it was like growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, one topic at a time. And with that, let's take a look at number 10 on the list. Coming in at number 10 is Excitebike. Originally released as a launch title for the NES here in the US, Excitebike is a side-scrolling racing game where players take control of a motocross racer competing in both solo and group races. And while the concept of playing a side-scrolling racing game certainly seems like an idea long forgotten, what made this game unique was its design mode, where players could create their own tracks using over 15 types of obstacles, which, for the time, was pretty cool. Now, the reason this game is coming in at number 10 is simple. I didn't actually own this game as a kid, but I did play this game quite a bit whenever I went to go visit my cousin at his house because he did own the game. And while it was certainly fun, it didn't really hold enough of my interest for me to beg my own parents to go out and buy it. But fear not, I can tell you with 100% confidence that the rest of the games on this list I did own in my possession growing up. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at number 9. At number 9, we have Donkey Kong Jr., the first of several games on this list ported over from arcades in the early 80s and released on the NES in North America in 1986. This is actually the sequel to the very popular Donkey Kong, the arcade classic from 1981. In this platforming game, you take control of Donkey Kong Jr., making your way through 4 levels, where the goal is to make your way to the top of the screen where DK sits caged up, awaiting rescue from the evil Jumpman, aka Mario before he got his name. In addition to jumping across platforms, you'll also need to climb vines, chains, and ropes in order to advance up the screen, all while avoiding various enemies. Now, as I said earlier, I did own this game as a kid as part of the collection with the original Donkey Kong, and while it certainly doesn't offer up much by today's standards, best believe I played the hell out of those 4 levels when I was a kid. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and take a look at number 8. Number 8 on the list is the original Donkey Kong, once again an arcade port from the early 1980s. In this original go-around with our favorite video game ape, sorry George, Chaos and Blizzard, you play as Jumpman, aka Mario before he got his name, as you set out to rescue your girlfriend Pauline from the evil clutches of Donkey Kong. Much like its successor, Donkey Kong is a platformer where you'll be tasked with jumping over barrels, clearing pitfalls, and climbing to the top of the screen to save your beloved.
Now, as I said before, I owned this game as part of a 2-pack with Donkey Kong Jr., and I played this game to death with my little brothers. Honestly, you could probably say it's a tie between this game and Donkey Kong Jr., but that's not how this list works. So onward and upward we go with number 7.
Coming in at number 7, we have Mighty Bomb Jack, which is probably the most obscure title on this list. Unlike the previous 2 entries, this game was an NES original, developed by Tecmo and released in the US in mid-1987, although it was the sequel to an arcade game that was simply titled Bomb Jack. In Mighty Bomb Jack, you play as Jack, a superhero of sorts with the ability to jump high, glide, and open chests as you make your way through 16 levels within a pyramid to defeat a demon and rescue a royal family.
As a kid, I remember this game being both fun as hell and hard as hell, and I never actually beat it as a kid, and honestly still haven't beaten it to this day, which is the reason you're not seeing any endgame footage from the game. But such is not the case with our next entry in the list, so let's take a look at number 6.
Rounding out the bottom 5 of this list at number 6 is Dr. Mario, the first and only puzzle game on this list. Released in the US in the summer of 1990, Dr. Mario proves that anyone can make a career change at any point, as is the case with our favorite former plumber. In this game, you play as Dr. Mario, with your goal being to eliminate all of the viruses on the screen by aligning vitamins of the same color to destroy these messy maggots of malaise. With every screen cleared, the challenge is increased with the amount of viruses on screen growing in each level.
Now, you might recall how I mentioned I was able to capture endgame footage for this game, and the reason for that is simply this.
Right at the beginning of the game, you can choose to start at any level you want to, including the final level, as well as adjust the speed of the vitamins. So technically, you could beat this game relatively quickly, but since it's a puzzle game, it's really more about working your way through all 21 levels, isn't it? Coming in at number 5, we have Star Tropics, released in the US in late 1990. Unlike any of the other games on this list, however, Star Tropics was only released in the US and in Europe. This top-down action-adventure game puts you in the shoes of Mike Jones, a 15-year-old high school baseball player from Seattle on a quest to find his missing uncle, Dr. Jones, in a tropical paradise known as Sea Island. Throughout the game, you'll navigate both an overworld map, interacting with villagers and other NPCs, as well as complex dungeons loaded with tricks and traps, with everything culminating in a battle with the final boss, Zoda. Now, if you're watching the gameplay footage, I know what you're probably thinking. This game is a total ripoff of the legendary game, Gremlins 2. Nah, I'm just kidding, but it is a total ripoff of the original Legend of Zelda. And this may surprise you, but I can honestly say I never played The Legend of Zelda as a kid. I just didn't own it. But you know what? Even on its own merit, Star Tropics is an awesome game. And while it definitely looks like a straight Zelda clone, it still has a ton of great things going for it. First off, it's set in the present day. Well, the present day of 1990 when it was released. So that meant the developers could provide a modern spin on a classic fantasy adventure while being able to play with some of the classic tropes in a new way. What also made it stand apart from Zelda is a simple mechanic: the jump button. I know it seems silly, but in the original Legend of Zelda, you had no jump button. And with the addition of a jump button in Star Tropics, the developers were able to add another layer of complexity within the dungeon puzzles.
And you know what? The game did so well, it actually garnered a sequel released in 1994 called Star Tropics 2, Zoda's Revenge, which actually I owned before I owned the original Star Tropics, and if I'm being honest, it's a superior game in every way. But, unfortunately, as of this recording, it is still not available on the NES Online Library for the Switch, despite the fact that it was previously available on the Wii Virtual Console. So, it doesn't make the list, but I definitely felt it deserved an honorable mention. So that being said, let's take a look at number 4.
At number 4, we have Super Mario Bros. 2, more specifically the American version. Remember that the original Super Mario Bros. 2 was hard as hell and didn't come out in the US until it was remastered for the Super Nintendo as part of the Super Mario All-Stars game, and at that point it was known as Super Mario The Lost Levels, but I digress. The American version of SMB2, released in 1988, is the sequel to the original smash hit, Super Mario Bros. You might have heard of it, where you have the chance to play as not only Mario and Luigi, the genetically similar Brooklyn-based Italian plumbers from Brooklyn, but also Princess Peach, known as Princess Toadstool back then, as well as Toad, the mushroom guy. Each character had the same basic controls while still possessing some unique abilities. Mario was your balanced, entry-level character that could run, jump, and dig at an average pace. Luigi controlled a bit more slippery when running, but had a vertical jump that would make the 1993 Chicago Bulls shit themselves. Princess Toadstool had the ability to hover for a short time, but couldn't dig fast to save her life, and Toad jumped like a rock, but could dig to China before you could wrap your brain around the fact that it's actually impossible to do so. The goal of our 4 heroes was to defeat the dreaded King Wart, who is essentially a giant frog that would be worthy of an episode of My 600-Pound Life. And the way to defeat him was to toss vegetables in his mouth, so yeah, that checks out.
Super Mario 2 was a classic in every sense of the word, and while it was certainly a departure from the previous Mario game and future titles in the series, it still retains that Mario charm, and actually did go on to influence later games in the series, and I have absolutely gone back and beaten this game countless times throughout the years. Alright, we're now looking at the top 3 games of the list, so without further ado, let's take a look at number 3.
For number 3, we have the OG, the original full-fledged adventure of our favorite red and blue hero, Super Mario Bros. Not to be confused with Mario Bros., which is also on the Switch in the online library and is based off another classic arcade game. What can I say that hasn't already been said countless times about this game? It's an absolute classic and has served as a blueprint for not only how to make a great platforming video game, but also how to teach kids how to play them. Alright, so in case you've been living under a rock, the goal of this game puts you in the shoes of Mario, an Italian plumber and Brooklyn native who must traverse a mushroom kingdom to rescue the princess from the castle of King Koopa himself, Bowser. You'll need to work your way across the kingdom's 8 worlds, the hard way or the easy way, earning coins and power-ups and 1-ups along the way as you stomp down on all of King Koopa's minions.
I didn't know a single person who owned an NES that did not own Super Mario Bros. In fact, my earliest memories of video games are tied directly to this game. I used to watch my sister and my parents play it, and then I started playing it when I was about 3 years old. It was, by and large, the perfect Mario game. Well, at least it was, until a few years later.
Coming in at number 2 is Super Mario Bros. 3, perhaps the greatest Mario game of all time. Yes, even better than Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo, in my opinion. This game took everything we all loved about the original Super Mario Bros. And cranked it up to 11. Once again, you're in control of Mario and Luigi, if you're playing 2 players, on a quest to save the apparently very kidnappable Princess Toadstool from the clutches of Bowser. But this time, you have to travel across 8 unique worlds, each with a ton of levels to get through, and do battle with each of Bowser's children, the Koopalings. Make it to the end of World 8, and once again, you get to go toe-to-toe with the main man, dragon, turtle thing himself. Defeat him, and the princess is safe once again.
While the original Super Mario Bros. Made me fall in love with video games, Super Mario Bros. 3 is the reason I still love video games to this day. It took things to a whole new level. My brothers and I would spend literal hours playing through every level of every world, and when we finally beat Bowser, we felt some serious accomplishment. And you know what? You would think that this game would be number 1 on my list here, but you might have noticed there's one more left.
And at number 1, we have Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! And before you say anything, I am well aware that the version of the game in the Switch library is the one that does not have Mike Tyson as the final boss, but you know what? It's still the same damn game, so I'm gonna count it. More than any other game on this list, Punch-Out!, which was originally released on the NES in late 1987, is a game that I will happily pick up and play almost on a weekly basis to this day. It's pretty straightforward from a story and gameplay perspective. You control Little Mac, a small but scrappy semi-professional boxer, with the goal of becoming the world champion. In order to do that, you have to defeat 13 other fighters before the final showdown with Mike Tyson, or for the sake of this video and the footage I was able to grab, Mr. Dream. The core gameplay is centered around timing and rhythm while dodging and throwing face and body punches at your opponents, and if you can knock them down 3 times in a round, you win. It's that simple. Each fight gets progressively more challenging, with the final fight against Mike Tyson and Mr. Dream being an all-out, balls-to-the-wall, nail-biting challenge to end all challenges. And I can honestly count on less than 2 hands how many times I've actually beaten the game from start to finish, but every time I do, I feel like I've been in an absolute war. Fortunately, if you don't feel like playing through the entire game, you can input a password that allows you to bypass a number of fighters, bringing you that much closer to the end game. And if you ever played Punch-Out! As a kid, you know you would have given your left nut to somebody who had the password to go straight to Tyson and Mr. Dream.
Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!, to me, is one of the greatest video games of all time, and it's even better than its sequels, the Super Nintendo and Wii versions, although, for the record, I still love those games as well. It's a game I've literally been playing for 30 years, and I feel like I've pretty much mastered it, except for maybe that fight against Mike Tyson. But I do remember as a kid, my dad had a friend who would come over, and he was really good at Punch-Out!, so we would insist that he would sit down with us and play through the game just so we could watch him beat the shit out of Mike Tyson. And you know what? It was glorious. And with that, we've reached the end of our list. But what about you? What Nintendo games did you play as a kid, and are they available as well on the Switch Online library? Let me know in the comments below, and if there are any other games you want me to talk about here on this channel, let me know that as well. That's going to do it for our first real video here on the channel, so thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.